Nas últimas eleições, nós não estávamos lutando apenas contra um sistema aqui do Brasil, mas sim um sistema internacional que trabalhava numa sintonia para censurar, perseguir e destruir a direita e os conservadores.
Promoting worldwide social media censorship of politicians like Donald Trump and Jair Bolsonaro and Modi in India and Marine Le Pen in France, okay?
Steve, I'm telling you right now, if USA did not exist, Bolsonaro would still be the president of Brazil, and Brazil would still have a free and open internet.
Curta, comente e compartilhe.
Fala, patriota! Nesse vídeo eu trago uma compilação bem redondinha para você ficar a par da bomba que acaba de cair sobre o cenário político do Brasil. A revelação do ex-secretário do Departamento de Estado dos Estados Unidos, Mike Pence.
Eu te peço encarecidamente que você assista esse vídeo até o final, eu garanto que vai valer a pena. Nas últimas eleições, nós não estávamos lutando apenas contra um sistema aqui do Brasil, mas sim um sistema internacional que trabalhava numa sintonia para censurar, perseguir e destruir a direita e os conservadores. É impressionante as informações que estão vindo à tona depois que o Donald Trump assumiu a presidência nos Estados Unidos. Hoje nós já tivemos notícias chocantes, informações que mostram claramente que áreas do Departamento dos Estados Unidos, do governo americano, estavam sendo usadas para financiar ONGs para trabalhar a política dentro do Brasil, para fortalecer a narrativa da esquerda, para treinar a imprensa a mentir e perseguir os seus opositores. Bom, isso foi só o que veio à tona com a USAID, depois que o Elon Musk publicou algumas transações que essa agência do governo americano estava fazendo. Só que agora eu vou mostrar para vocês um relato de um ex-funcionário do Departamento dos Estados Unidos, o Mike Pence, falando exatamente isso, só que agora muito pior. É o governo americano influenciando diretamente na imprensa, no sistema judiciário de outros países para censurar os apoiadores e políticos da oposição da esquerda.
The Atlanta Council receives U.S. taxpayer funding from the State Department, USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA cut out, the Defense Department, the U.S. Marines, the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, and numerous other federal agencies. Every single one of those provide annual funding every year to this group you are about to watch, training journalists from Reuters, from the New York Times, from Der Spiegel, from Le Monde, in a frigging how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb style smoky room, so that they can go back to their desks and flag disinformation in Trump tweets and pro-Brexit tweets. That means the same electorate who democratically elected Donald Trump as president in 2016 also paid a NATO think tank to train journalists to muzzle Trump's social media reach ahead of the 2020 election cycle. This is in 2019. This is 5 years ago. The Atlanta Council is known as NATO's think tank. Let me just see you understand. It's literally NATO's civilian clandestine political action consensus building firm. This is what they're known for in Washington. They represent NATO. So again, their largest funder, the United States Department of State, and then Defense Department, Department of Energy, because they're about control of energy geopolitics, USAID, National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA cut out, the Marines, the Air Force, the Navy, all in a single year. What are they paying them to do? To influence and advance on the civilian side what the military intelligence and diplomacy sphere wants to be done at the geopolitical and military level. The Atlanta Council has 7 CIA directors on its board. A lot of people don't know that 7 former number 1 chiefs of the Central Intelligence Agency are still alive, let alone all concentrated together on the board of a single institution promoting worldwide social media censorship of politicians like Donald Trump and Jair Bolsonaro and Modi in India and Marine Le Pen in France, okay?
Brother Benz, why is it a bad thing to have something like the USA that sounds on the surface of it? You just saw the big crocodile tears they're crying on MSNBC. It's for humanitarian projects. It's for development projects. It's to help bring water to the village. And that's a pretty good cover. Why is USA? Why do we rip the mask off and say it's a CIA? And what is the advantage to the American people? You mentioned that it gave the money to a same sort of folks throughout the world. Who are those folks, and why is it an advantage to the populist nationalist movement in the American working man and woman to basically rip the mask off, face what it is, and then shut it down, sir?
Well, this is a very, very complicated question, and I really hope that Trump World Foreign Policy folks understand the open heart surgery they're conducting on the way our foreign policy operates around the world. And in terms of why it's a bad thing that USAID does what it does, this is one of these questions that, you know, I've known and followed this stuff for many years, but I never made a crusade about taking it on until USAID got in the business of censoring the internet. And at that point, and censoring Americans on the American internet, and censoring American social media companies as a foreign-facing humanitarian NGO sponsor, you know, that everyone knows is just the CIA's plausible deniability layer and funding conduit. But when it started to be used against Americans on American soil, that to me was the final straw. That no matter how useful it may be to spend $40 billion a year bribing warlords in Africa, bribing oligarchs in Ukraine, bribing and recruiting terrorists in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Syria, you know, disguising medical supply vans, you know, in Venezuela with boxes of AK-47s and military supplies. The fact is it is no longer a foreign policy instrument. It is a domestic control instrument, and that is the final straw. You can't do that to Americans.
Do you have any evidence in all your research, because you're like the axe in the space, that it's actually been used domestically against Americans, not just for doing warlord stuff like that, but actually against Americans?
Oh my God, yes. The USAID in 2021, they made a formal policy pivot to stopping disinformation on the internet, and they targeted U.S. technology companies. They targeted Facebook. They targeted Twitter 1.0. They targeted YouTube. They targeted all of the online information space. They were working with NewsGuard and Global Disinformation Index, and they were partnered with the State Department's Democracy, Rights, and Labor. They have which works with USAID's group called the Democracy, Human Rights, and Rule of Law. I'm sorry, Democracy, Governance, and Rights Bureau. And what they did is, under the banner of democracy promotion. See, this is the thing. They're supposed to be a democracy promotion organization. It's one of the reasons that they are accountable to the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Senate Foreign Relations Committee. They said that disinformation.
I know you got to bounce, but I just want to hold you through a short break and for a minute or two afterwards. I just want to make sure when we leave this today, people understand that you've made the case of why this place is dangerous and not some humanitarian thing, giving out money to like the nuns to save the orphans in sub-Saharan Africa. Short commercial has been on this idea about a government, an administrative state and deep state that's been out of control. Ben's has been on this for years. So Ben's, when they actually start to allocate money to domestic programs and to all the misinformation, shutting down free speech on the internet, like against War Room, everybody, that money's allocated. We had this audience sat through the appropriations, the individual bills appropriations, and Eli Crane and Matt Gaetz making this case, I think back in the summer of 2024, 23 and 24 for two different authorizations bills. That time, less than 50% of the Republicans backed them. These things didn't pass in these subcommittees. Was anybody overseeing this? Did people on Capitol Hill know that they had started to use this to target American citizens, sir?
Well, let me clarify that, because there's a distinction here, which is that USAID does work that has dramatic impact on our domestic politics and domestic American-to-American affairs, but they funnel it through international organizations that operate on U.S. soil, rather than rather than, for the most part, directly with U.S. organizations, although they do. For example, the USAID partner with the American Bar Association for, and these type of things. But for example, the USAID gave $27 million to the fiscal sponsor of the Soros prosecutor control group. That, everyone here, you talk about Soros prosecutors and Soros funds these prosecutors, and then Soros funded NGOs, in particular this main one called Fair and Just Prosecutions. This group that tells Soros prosecutors what to do. Well, that group got more from USAID than it did from George Soros. It got its fiscal sponsor did $27 million to the Tide Center, which also played a major role in fomenting Black Lives Matter, as one of the main parent groups to the Black Lives Matter groups. You have to understand, USAID is at the dead center. It occupies the center space between the State Department, the Pentagon, and the CIA. It's a switch player that serves as a plausibly deniable assistance agency to the rogue activities of those three federal agencies, and it represents essentially the sum consensus of the foreign policy establishment, the legacy foreign policy establishment that hated Trump with a passion, wanted to take him down because of his foreign policy views and because of his economic nationalism here at home. And what USAID declared doctrinally is that populism is an attack on democracy. They say this openly in USAID meetings. They say this openly in USAID documents. I published this a year and a half ago. The USAID Disinformation Primer published the first month of Biden's term in office, saying that the purpose of their disinformation programs was to eliminate populist subject matter expertise on the internet, because populist news sites undermine USAID programming by undermining public faith and confidence in democratic institutions. Because, don't you know, USAID spends billions of dollars to control the media every year. All the major media outlets in Ukraine are funded by USAID, like the Kiev Independent. All of the major news outlets in Western Hemisphere or in many parts of Africa and Central Asia, it does what the CIA used to do. Everyone remembers Operation Mockingbird. Well, guess what? That's just called USAID Media Sustainability and Media Assistance. Okay? That's all that is. And when populist waves swept the world in the US in 2016 with Trump, and with what happened all over Europe with Marine Le Pen and Matteo Salvini and Nigel Farage, USAID declared censorship holy war against every single populist group, including Bolsonaro. Steve, I'm telling you right now, if USAID did not exist, Bolsonaro would still be the president of Brazil, and Brazil would still have a free and open internet. It was USAID that spent tens of millions of dollars of American taxpayer money funding the push to get anti-misinformation bills passed in the parliament there, funding the legal advocates who pushed the censorship court there, the TSE, to crack down on Bolsonaro tweets and WhatsApp and Telegram messages. They built a censorship octopus in Brazil, and it was built entirely on USAID because USAID declared Bolsonaro a populist, Trump of the tropics, and then set up this operation to control the information ecosystem there. One of the USAID grantees even said on a public call that the purpose was to eliminate the international exchange of ideas between the Trump movement and the Bolsonaro movement. That's what USAID does. They kill domestic populism because it gets in the way of their foreign policy goals.
Agora eu quero saber de você o seguinte: o que você acha que pode acontecer daqui pra frente? Deixe seu palpite no campo dos comentários. Até a próxima.
E não se esqueça, se inscreva no canal. Passa o meu dia.